Hi guys, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for hearing me out. So I was asked to speak today. I'm a tattoo artist and I want to share a little bit about kind of my experiences as an entrepreneur, as doing business, and just kind of like living a life that I'm happy to be living. So I've been tattooing 16 years, and in that time I've seen like kind of like the good and the bad and all the in between. And even before I started tattooing, you know, I think back, it was literally like 20 years ago this year. I was graduating high school and I was thinking to myself, like, if I could go back in time and if I could relay some stuff to a younger me, what would have helped me out and served me. And I'm thinking about the things that I've learned in that 20 years that has helped me, and that's kind of the stuff I'd like to share with you today. And I wanted to be versatile beyond just tattooing stuff. It's things you can apply to anything. And ultimately, if you're looking at business and being an entrepreneur or any of that, it's really the common denominator in anything you're going to have is you. You're the person providing either the product or the service, generally if you're in business for yourself. So you're the common denominator there in terms of your interactions with everything and everyone else. So you really want to make sure before you look at anything that you're really good with you. And that's kind of what we're going to look at today, is some things. I want to give you some tools that you can use that are going to help give you maybe some stability in the future, some new ways of looking at stuff, just different tools of thinking that you can use that are going to help you hopefully as much as they've helped me. And so some of them are books I've read that you can follow up with, and I'll give you a little bit of information on them. Some of them are more like permaculture. I heard somebody asking what the hell is permaculture. It's a design science basically, and you can totally, like, you can get like masters in permaculture design now. I have a certificate in permaculture design, and what it is essentially it's a science that you can apply towards the creation of systems. So most people, when they think of permaculture, they would associate it with like natural farming, but it's really something that can be applied to everything. And it's utilizing a set of like ethics and principles to do that. We'll go over that in a little bit. We're also going to go over the 4 Agreements. That's a book by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a very amazing book. It was life-changing for me. I want to share a little bit about that and encourage you guys to check that out on your own time. We're going to talk about some jiu-jitsu stuff that I found helpful that you guys might like to know about. We're going to talk a little bit about building your brand and then marketing your brand and what that looks like, and actual like tangible things you can do with that in terms of like social media. Let's see here. That's the majority of what we're going to talk about today. So, you know, to start out in terms of business, there is a really great analogy I found on Star Trek actually, and it's this idea of really when you're in business or you're an entrepreneur, you're essentially, you are providing a product or a service that people want or need. They might not necessarily need it, but they'll want it, you know, like especially if you're doing the right advertising and stuff. Part of your job there is to make people feel like they want or need your product, but we'll get into that. So like there's this concept in Star Trek called the material continuum, and we're gonna watch a little clip from Star Trek where are any of you guys familiar with the show? Do any of you guys watch it at all? Are you Trekkies? Okay, are you familiar with the Ferengis? Anybody? Okay, it's like from like Deep Space Nine, but it's this race of aliens that are like super capitalist, and like they're very much like business-minded individuals, but like they kind of poke fun at them a little bit because like all of the things we associate with like the bad side of capitalism, like being greedy and kind of dishonest and all that, they kind of exemplify that to an extent. But they do have this one thing called the material continuum, which is pretty cool. And it's just this understanding that there's always going to be a need out there, and you can put yourself in a position to be the one who can fulfill that need. And if you can do that in business, then you're going to set yourself up better. But if you can do that in business and then do it ethically with permaculture, even better, because then you're not going to end up destroying your society. So like, for example, they talk about like, this is a thread from Reddit I threw up here because I thought it was funny if you want to check it out later, but they're like, I wonder how the Ferengi dealt with the issues of late-stage capitalism. I mean, they did. That's kind of where we're at now with like everything sort of imploding. So like, what's the solution? I'm not entirely sure, but I think incorporating permaculture will help. So let's see. Yeah, we're gonna pull up this. It's like 3 minutes, but it's kind of a fun explanation for it.
Morning, Lieutenant.
I'd make myself scarce if I were you. What? Chief, in here now. Tried to warn you. You mind explaining this?
Where's the captain's desk?
Oh, you don't know? This is your authorization code, isn't it?
No, good.
What about him?
Well, he must have traded the captain's desk for the graviton stabilizer.
Excuse me?
Don't worry, Colonel. I will get the desk back.
Yeah. The captain is returning from Major in 2 days. And when he does, I want his desk sitting right here, where it belongs.
Don't worry, Chief. I did give away the captain's desk. I just loaned it to someone.
Who?
Al Lorenzo,
Who's Al Lorenzo?
the chief of the operations on Dacos Prime.
Well, what does he want with the captain's desk?
He wants to take a picture of it.
Why?
He likes to collect holo photos of himself sitting behind the desks of famous Starfleet captains. Usually he just sneaks into their offices, but with the war on, it's been hard for him to get away.
Well, that makes sense.
He's got quite a collection. Captain DeSoto's desk, Captain Picard's.
Okay, fine. So, once he has his picture, he's going to send us the graviton stabilizer.
No, he's giving us an induction modulator.
Well, we don't need an induction modulator.
But the USS Musashi does.
So the Musashi is going to send us the stabilizer.
No, they're giving us a phaser emitter.
But we don't need a phaser emitter.
I know, but the USS Sentinel does. And they have the extra stabilizer.
And they're willing to give it up for a phaser emitter?
That's the rumor.
Rumor? But you made all these deals based on a rumor?
From a very reliable source.
Well, what if it turns out not to be true?
You have to have faith, Chief.
In a rumor?
No, in the great material continuum.
Who are they?
It's not a they. It's the force that binds the universe together.
I must have missed that class in engineering school.
Out of Ferenginar, we learned about the continuum while we still have our first set of years.
This is no time for Ferengi fairy tales.
The continuum is real. You see, there are millions upon millions of worlds in the universe. Each one filled with too much of one thing and not enough of another. And the great continuum flows through them all like a mighty river, from have to want and back again. And if we navigate the continuum with skill and grace, our ship will be filled with everything our hearts desire.
And right now, I'd set up our stabilizer and the captain's desk.
The river will provide.
Huh? Doesn't sink us first.
Alright, so like that's kind of a good example of the philosophy of the material continuum. You can kind of take this idea and apply it to business. Like essentially, necessity is the mother of all invention. There's something somebody needs or wants somewhere, and if you can be the one to provide that, you will be in a better position in terms of business. If you can be the one to provide the best, even better, and that's where this stuff comes in. But a couple of things I want to point out. Did you guys notice that Nog, the Ferengi guy, he just kind of like helped himself to his captain's desk, didn't really say anything, he was just like, well, and kind of just did it on like, he took quite a risk there. So like, one thing with the Ferengis, they don't necessarily have like the strongest set of like ethics in certain ways. So you want to be mindful about that, because if it works out for him, great, you know, he just like saved the day. But if it doesn't, now they're also out of captain's desk. So there's always going to be risk involved. Is it like, you know, that's where like if you can arm yourself with the data, then you're going to do better. So really everything starts with you though. from this presentation, the one thing I want you to take away from here more than anything is you're the common denominator, and you have the power to choose how you're going to look at everything. Because ultimately, like any kind of success, you're really going to be coming down to a combination of attitude, action, and information. If you have the right attitude, it's going to allow you to absorb information in such a way that you're going to see more opportunities. You're going to see more freedom. If you have a bad attitude, that's going to limit you severely. You're not going to get as much done. You're not going to see as many avenues and options, and you're going to be looking at everything from a lens of fear, which can make the world a really gnarly place to be in. And it's already hard enough as it is. We don't need to make it harder for ourselves. So like the first thing I want to stress is you, me, us as individuals, we have control over nothing but how we think. The only thing we truly have any control over whatsoever in reality in life is really our attitude and the meaning we decide to give things that we encounter. So one thinking tool that's helpful when you're encountering life and all that will help you kind of maintain some balance through all the chaos and stuff is this book called The 4 Agreements. And so the 4 agreements are these 4 different things that you can kind of do for yourself that are going to help you like come to the world in a better way. It's basically it follows on the premise that we have enormous creative capabilities in what we speak. Think of it this way. Your inner world, your mental world, the things you think on a consistent basis tend to become the things you speak on a consistent basis. And the things that you speak on a consistent basis tend to play out in your actions. And then your actions tend to create who you are as an individual and a person, and the life that you're seeing is going to be the life that you have based on the choices you make. All of that starts with your thoughts. It starts with how you see the world and the story you tell yourself about things as they're happening. So if you can take ownership of that story and take charge of that, that gives you an enormous advantage. So the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. And at the surface, this is going to look like, just speaking with integrity, saying what you mean, being honest with yourself and others. But there's another aspect to that too, and it's the concept of our word. Our words have power. Have you ever heard of like when you're writing something and they call it spelling? There's a hidden sort of like hint in there with this concept of spelling. We're creating magic when we speak, when we write, when we think by what we're putting out there. There is a physics experiment that shows now that our thoughts actually have an impact on the physical world around us. It's called the double slit experiment, and what it showed is that the act of observing fundamental particles changed how they behaved. They tried to measure it to behave differently than they would. And that's like a long tangent going to something else. But if you want to check it out, a book called The Kea'au Physics is a great place to start if you want to learn how it's looking more and more like our consciousness plays a really huge role in the reality we're experiencing. So that's another great book to look at. So going in line with those things, being impeccable with your word, that's the knowledge that you're a powerful creator and you can be speaking good things into the world, creating good things, or you can be creating hell for yourself, depending. So like really honoring that and speaking good. The second is don't make assumptions. How many times have you had an encounter with a person, place, or thing, and you told yourself a story about it, and maybe even let yourself get like super emotional over it? Maybe it wrecked your whole day, and then you come to find out later that the story you were telling yourself was completely false after you got further information. So one thing we want to be mindful of is not making assumptions. You want to stay curious. That's the same thing with don't take anything personally. You want to stay curious, you want to find out, you want to gather data and know exactly what's going on before you try to make any sort of assumptions about anything. Assumptions make an ass of you and me, they say. So like, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, stay curious, ask questions, trust but verify. And then fourth on this, we have always do your best. Now, one thing that's really, 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 really important to remember is that your best can change from one day to the next. So you have to give yourself grace throughout this too. If you approach any situation doing the best that you're capable of and knowing that for yourself, that's a huge confidence booster. But also remember in tandem with that, that your best on a day you're feeling well rested, you've eaten well, you're hydrated, it's going to be a lot different than, like, say, day you have the flu, right? So be gentle with yourself. Give yourself grace. Always try to do your best, show up your best, perform your best, but know that you don't expect yourself to be perfect. Just better than you were the day before, Always aim to improve, but also give yourself grace. And also remember, how many of us will be super kind to other people? We'll give other people grace. They do something, and you're like, it's cool, everybody makes mistakes, but then you might do the same thing and then you just shred yourself to pieces for that. That's not serving. You don't do that, because that is creating that negativity and it's going to snowball. So this is a book, The 4 Agreements. Totally worth the read. It's like 150 pages, something like that. It's not super long, but it's a good book. The next thing I want to kind of go over, another thought tool that's really helpful is actually this concept of base and space. And this is something I've learned about in martial arts and jiu-jitsu. So when you're doing martial arts, one thing you'll see a lot, they got that stance. They're establishing a strong base. Because if you have a good base, somebody comes at you, they're going to have a harder time knocking you on your ass, right? You don't want that. You want to be able to have the freedom of movement. So you have your base. You're protecting your base. You're keeping that solid. You're keeping yourself solid. That is your pyramid, your foundation. Then you also have the concept of space, and that is also freedom. So when you're sparring in jiu-jitsu, you're either trying to create space for yourself, so you have room to breathe, so you have room to move, to get out of a situation, to go on offensive, whatever it means in that situation. You're trying to create space for yourself, then you're trying to take it away from your opponent. So you take this idea and you're sparring, and that seems pretty obvious, straightforward. I think everyone's on the same page there with what that looks like when you're sparring, but how do you apply that to real life? So you want to be firm in your base. Your base is basically going to be like this 4 agreements area of stuff here. Your base is your ethics. Your base is your boundaries. Your boundaries are what protects you. Your firm boundaries, they're there to keep you safe. I have a boundary in this because if someone crosses this boundary, I don't feel right. It's maybe your boundaries can be so many things. It's what's important to you. It could be like physical boundaries, mental, emotional boundaries, financial boundaries. It's basically anytime you think that like your sense of safety itself is threatened, you put up a boundary and be like, I don't like that, I don't accept that for myself, and so having good boundaries is having a good base. But you have to also have a good knowledge of yourself. That's where we're going back into this data concept. Spend some time in self-reflection, journaling, getting to know what makes you tick, what triggers you. Do you ever have something come up and it kind of like pisses you off, and then you sit back and you're like, why did I feel that way about that? That would be a trigger. It's important to know that, because a lot of times we're programmed, we have stuff pop up that we don't even know why we feel that way a lot of the time. It can come from trauma, So knowing yourself, you're gonna know what your base looks like. You gotta gather that data. Then the space, that's your freedom of movement. So you can take that and you can apply it to your boundaries. You can apply that to, habits, people, places, things, anything. You can look at that, whatever it might be, and be like, is this gonna affect my stability, my base for myself? Do I have space in my life to take this on, or is this gonna be too much for me? So those are 2 really important things to think about in life. Stuff you can use in jiu-jitsu that you can apply to everything else, and it's pretty awesome. So these things here, and then from there I would go into there's the concept of knowledge and application too. So like I've mentioned a few times, you have this wanting to gather data, understand the situation really well, And I might not have gotten to that with you guys, so let's go to the next slide. This is where we get into permaculture. So what is permaculture? Permaculture is an acronym for permanent culture, which is a big hint right there. With most stuff, we think about like sustainability. We think about like how, like when it comes to green movements, the word sustainability gets thrown out there a lot. But it's actually, what we're really looking for is a word called regenerative. Regenerative means we're making it better than we found it. We see something, we want to improve it for everybody else and ourselves. So permaculture is a regenerative design science. So what we're doing is these are 12 principles here, and we're using these 12 principles and we're reflecting on these and referring back to these whenever we're creating any kind of system. A system can be anything from like, having a farm to having a business plan. Basically, your system is all your step-by-step stuff to make things happen. I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute here. So the 12 principles we got here are observe and interact, catch and store energy, use and value renewable resources and services, use edges and value the marginal, design from patterns to detail, produce no waste, obtain a yield, integrate rather than segregate, use small, slow solutions, use and value diversity, and then creatively use and respond to change. So those are the 12 principles. And some of them might seem a little bit redundant in some ways too, which I'll go into because they do kind of have a way of like interacting with each other. Okay. So some ones I want to kind of point out that I see a lot of interesting stuff with, and I think will be really helpful for you guys today without going into detail on every single one of them. So observe and interact, that's going to be the biggest one. I've already touched on this a few times. Knowledge is power. The more data you can gather about any subject or anything you're trying to do or be or whatever, the better your chances of success are going to be. So like, get hungry. Learn about everything you can as much as you can. Think about the time you spend and how much time you could perhaps allocate to just taking a little time every day to learn something new, And you can do that in simple ways, just changing up your algorithm feed on TikTok. Maybe start following some pages that are going to inform you on some stuff, like we can be entertained in a lot of different ways, but I'll get back to that in a second. So, data, collect data as much as possible. Always be observant, always be taking it in, So, and that meshes well with the 4 agreements too. If you look back to this, we're not making assumptions. We're not taking anything personally. We're gathering data, right? So then the next one that kind of goes through well with this too is use edges and value the marginal. So why that's important is the edges of any system, you're basically going to have something that looks like this. Have you ever heard of a Venn diagram? So you've got thing 1, and then you got thing 2 over here, and then there's a combination over here that makes thing 3. And this is where the evolution happens. This would be what we would consider the fringe right here between these two systems. If this is a system and this is a system, this is the margins in the system, the edges. And this is where you're going to have the most evolution happening. Because aspects of this are blending with aspects of this, and you're getting growth. So that's where the most interesting shit's going to happen. Whether that is like between people, groups of people, the fringes of society, so to speak. You see that in the tattoo culture, actually, a lot of cool stuff there. Whether that is in a garden, the fringes of one type of plant next to the fringes of another, you might see that it brings in different like insects you wouldn't see otherwise. You might see that maybe the plants are behaving in ways you wouldn't see otherwise. So really be curious. Be curious. Look at the fringes. Don't just look at something that's different and be like, whatever, it's different, I don't care. Like, because there could be a lot that you can distill out of that kind of stuff. So always think about the edges, the fringes, and value that. Use it to your advantage, observe it. Obtain a yield. You want to be able to support yourself as soon as you can. There's a phrase with like planting trees, for example. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to is today. So let's say in terms of like farming, as an example, let's say you purchase some land and you have a goal of creating an orchard, right? You want to do like a food forest. We all know with trees, fruit trees, it takes time for them to produce. It might be 2, 3, 5 years even before you have any sort of crop that you can do anything. So what do you do in the meantime? You're at that point going to want to be multifunctional. You're going to want to incorporate some diversity in there and be growing different things. So then you may have like a vegetable garden and like some like different perennial fruit things and stuff like that you can grow that are going to help support you quicker. Now that's applying to farming, but if I were to use that same example with myself as a tattoo artist, I can show you something here. So like my main thing, what I mainly offer, the way I make the most of my money is through tattoos, right? And a lot of times it's like, for me, ideally on a perfect day, I'm trying to do large scale pieces. I'm trying to focus on bigger projects. I've been tattooing for 16 years and this is, like the goal. We want to do bigger, more cool shit, right? So that's the end goal, but it takes time to get there. It takes time to build up that client base that's going to trust you to do those big projects. It takes time. So what do you do in the meantime while you're waiting on that skill level to come in and like the clientele and all that? Well, you keep drawing, you keep producing, you keep making stuff. And you offer different rates. So like, I've got on my website, you can book a consultation with me for a tattoo. They can do that, but what if they don't have the money to spend on a sleeve? They might be interested in a print I have available for sale.
Do you want me to show them your website?
Yes, please. They might be interested in stickers.
What's the link again?
It's mediums.art. So it's basically being multifunctional, versatile, and what you have to offer. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Now, like here on my website, what I got is so like there's tattoos, art pieces store. The tattoos I have, that's a service I offer. That's my higher end kind of thing, generally speaking. But if people were interested, they could go here and you see, like, if you click on these are all designs I've done. I have my stuff printed through a third-party company that allows me to put all of my art on different merch. I can have it printed on stickers, water bottles, clothing, all this different stuff. It's completely free for me to do it. It's printed on demand, so somebody sees like this, they want to buy it, they can put in all the specs, customize it to them, and then I get a cut out of that. And like, I like it pretty well. I have been looking at wanting to just explore different, because Redbubble is just one of many places. But if you want to write down Redbubble, then you can Google similar. But if you're an artist kind of person, there's nothing stopping you from doing the same thing. It didn't cost me a cent to do it. You got art. People like stickers. You could be selling stickers. You could be starting your hustle, entrepreneur stuff right now, today, if you wanted to. It's really just having something that people might like, So going back to this though. So like, I might have like stickers. They're cheap. It's like less than $5 you can get a sticker. So there's that. Then you can go into the next level where I might have like nicer like canvas prints of some of my paintings. That might bring me in like $50, And then I go into the tattooing. Someone books a day session with me, my rates are typically $1,200 for a day session. And that's the way I like to do bigger pieces because I don't have to stress out about charging hourly and feeling like I'm on a time crunch because it's permanent, it's on someone, it's gonna be on them forever, I don't wanna rush it, right? So that's another thing too with the rates. You can charge different ways. Like I've seen people charge like by the piece where they put the tattoo on a grid and count up all the squares and then charge accordingly. I've seen people do hourly, and then I've seen people quote by like a day rate. You can do all kinds of different things with that. Like you can get creative about how you charge stuff, but you want to have a variety of things for people because what works for one person might not work for another person, but if you can accommodate as many people as you can in a way that still works for you, then that gives you more options. So here I've got, you know, the merch people can buy. They can also like order, like I do tarot and oracle readings, so they can commission me for a reading that's like $40. They can, I have music, I have an album up on Spotify. You can do that pretty cheap. Like if any of you are like aspiring musicians and stuff, it's a lot easier to self-publish your stuff now. You don't necessarily have to have like a record label. You can literally, there's actually an app called Amuse. If there are any of the like musician kind of people producing, check out this app because they will help you get your stuff onto distributors. Do you have a question or? Oh, sorry. But that's just a side thing. But you know, like you get your music up on Spotify, for example, then you're getting paid every time someone clicks on it. You know, you start getting to the next thing we're going to discuss, which is your marketing. So if your brand, let's go back to this actually. So I think we've got most of these. Let me just see if there's anything else I want to cover with permaculture, because then I'll start going into the branding aspect of things and the marketing. But first, we want to focus on the you aspect of things. So this stuff here is basically what's going to arm you with the information you need to create good systems that are going to, you know, produce the highest yield for the least amount of waste and the least amount of resources used. So a couple of other things that are in here that are helpful, you know, there's like catch and store energy, use renewable resources, use edges, that. The renewable resources and catch and store energy, I feel like that's all pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Creatively use and respond to change, and then diversity. That's the last thing I want to go into with regard to permaculture. Let's talk about Maui for a second. What happened to Lahaina? There's a whole city that's gone. There's a whole city full of tattoo shops. Every tattoo shop in Lahaina is gone, as far as I know. I worked in Lahaina and lived there for a couple of years. I came from Maui recently. I was last in Wailuku, so luckily the shop I was working at there didn't get hit, but a shop I used to work at, and a lot of artists I know have lost everything. So that's where we want to start talking about diversity and really making sure that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Who's heard the phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket? It's a good phrase. It's kind of cliche for a reason. So like if you're in business for yourself, you're an entrepreneur, and you may want to consider like having a lot of options available for people and having it express in a lot of ways what you're doing. So taking the shops in Lahaina as an example, the guy I used to work for over there, he owns basically like a franchise at this point, but it's a shop called Skin Factory Tattoo in Maui. He owns that one there, which is gone now, and then he owned 2 other shops in Vegas. So he's obviously got some successful business plans if he's managed to open 3 different shops in some pretty like busy areas. Maui's not a cheap place. What he did when he opened his shop in Lahaina is he spent a good 5 years observing that area before he even opened it. He was looking to make sure that he kind of set himself up in the best way possible. So he was looking to find the best location. The location he had was amazing. That shop was always busy. There was like a courtyard that had a shave ice place, so that he had a lot of foot traffic coming through there. It was really important for a tattoo shop. And pretty much any place you're going to have a storefront, you want a lot of foot traffic. You want people to see it. A lot of times you're going to do better too if you have a storefront that's on the ground level. People aren't going to want to go up the stairs as much, you know. There's little things like that to think about. So he spent a lot of time looking for the perfect conditions before he was ready to open the shop. And then he spent that time saving money and everything too. And then when he went and got ready to open the shop, he did that. Now some of the systems he had in place that really helped him out, one thing he did great was when it comes to Google, and he had his like SEO game on point. SEO, if you're not sure what that is, that stands for search engine optimization. And that is basically what the web crawlers and things with Google are going to be looking at when they pull up your website. So Eddie's site, he was one of the first websites you would see when you go on Google and you search for a tattoo shop in Maui. And the reason why is because this web guy was doing a few things other tattoo shops probably weren't. One is like working with search engine optimization. So he would put up a blog post that would talk about different details on tattooing. He might, anything. And then within that post, he's gonna have certain keywords, hashtags, and things like that. The web crawlers through Google are gonna pick that up. That's gonna give them priority on the search engines when it pulls that up because it has more of those keywords associated with it. So like they're consistently putting up blog posts and content and stuff like that, that's consistently flooding those web crawlers with his content online. So going back to the diversity thing though, so he's got another shop on the mainland. Luckily, he didn't just have one shop. There's a lot of tattoo artists and a lot of shops that just had one thing and they didn't have anything else. Another thing you could think about, having is like your physical storefront, physical products, and then maybe, like you could also have in tandem with that, like a digital download, something that exists in a cloud somewhere, so that if you have a fire, it's not destroying all your merchandise. Like that's a thing that could happen. So having multiple like income streams is a good idea. So you could be doing that through services, products, and having multiple income streams. And also multiple price ranges too, because everybody's got a different budget, so just thinking about that. A couple other things too with this, small and slow solutions, patterns to details. So when you're designing something, you really want to keep it simple to start up. With small, slow solutions and patterns to details, there's an analogy I'll use here, and that's with art. So if I am doing a portrait of somebody, and I'm drawing them, I'm not gonna start out with like the little details like a person's eyelashes or their nostril. I'm gonna start out with the basic shape. So I'm gonna look and see like how can I take this figure here and break it into something simple. So like someone standing here, spheres for the head, cylinder for the body. I'm gonna work in, rough in all those basic shapes, and then from there I'm gonna refine it. So it's gonna look like, got the shapes, right? And then I would start marking in, okay, so where these features go. Then I'm mapping this out, and just little bit by little bit, I'm bringing more and more refinement. And you could kind of like think of it like slowly bringing the picture into focus. You're not gonna make out all the details right away. You're just gonna be basically like see, the silhouette. But then as you continue on and you progress, it starts getting more fleshed out and detailed. But you don't want to start out with the details. You want to start out with the big stuff and then fill in the details later. So you do that with art, and you do that with pretty much everything else too. You're writing a paper, you're going to want to put an outline in there. You want to get an idea, like a general map, and then refine it. So working from patterns to details and small solutions. Why do we do that? It makes things less complicated. It makes it less confusing. And that's really important too when we start getting into troubleshooting. So we have a problem come up, we got to figure out how to fix it. And usually you're going to be adjusting little things, one thing at a time, until you figure out what the solution is. So if you have a problem and you change like 5 things at once, that's 5 things you got to keep track of. Whereas if you were to just change one thing at a time, you can be, okay, I changed this didn't work, I'm going to try this now. Instead of doing like, I did this, and this, it's not working, and I'm not sure which one it is, So that's kind of the main stuff I wanted to focus on with regard to the permaculture principles. A couple other things there. So there's the 12 principles of permaculture, but there's also ethics. And the ethics are care for the earth, care for the people, and share the surplus. We got enough to support everybody so long as we're looking out for everybody. And it's just a design science. It's how we can take practical approaches to making things better than we found them. going on to the next one. So, using these tools to improve yourself. And in improving yourself, you can improve your brand. Your brand could be you, your brand could be something you create, like Nike. Everybody, who has not heard of Nike in here? Yeah, nobody, everyone's freaking heard of Nike. What's interesting about Nike is that the name they chose is actually the name of the Greek goddess of victory. That's pretty good branding. So when you're building your brand, you want to think about, what is it that I'm presenting to people? And with that, if you can kind of be true to yourself, you're going to make things a lot easier in the long run. Rather, if you're trying to build a brand that isn't really true to who you are and your own, like inner compass, you might run into problems. And that's kind of why I'm putting so much focus on this, because if you have a firm foundation here, firm stable foundation, your brand is going to be solid. And that's going to be really important, because your brand is also what's going to build trust. It's going to tell people who you are, what you're about, what your passion and your purpose is. When you're building your brand, you want to look at that, your passion and your purpose, whatever you're trying to do in business. Ideally, you're going to have probably more staying power if you give a shit about it, if you care about it, if it's important to you for some reason. That could be important to you because it's something you just simply enjoy, like a hobby. It could be important to you because it's something that you care about deeply, like an activist sort of situation. It could be lots of things, and not one thing is necessarily better than another. But if you have passion and you have purpose, it's going to give you more motivation when things get hard. So like, they have passion, they have purpose. Their purpose might be selling shoes, but they do it well for the most part. Although I will say, I was doing some research on this and I found a marketing flop they did, a branding flop, if you will. I found a pair of shoes and they had like a throwback to kind of like honor that goddess Nike, but then they spelled her name wrong, like in Greek, so the Greek people were like, what are you guys doing? So be mindful of that too. If you are going to be emulating like a Greek goddess, you might want to get her name right when you're doing your marketing and putting a bunch of shoes out there with the wrong name. Things like that, it's worth thinking about. So if your brand is your vibe, then marketing is connecting with people, your tribe. Your tribe is the people who match your vibe, right? You don't want to appeal to everybody. You don't need to appeal to everybody. There are 8+ billion people on the planet. You don't want to appeal to everybody. They'd be overwhelming. You just want to find the right people. So you find the right people by being yourself, being true to yourself, what you're about, what you care about, and then putting yourself out there. So there's different ways you can connect with your tribe, with your ideal clients. One is advertising. A lot of this is going to be more of your old school shit. So that's like your press releases. You could do, one person I used to work with, she had a friend who was a journalist, so she got her friend to actually do a press release for her in the newspaper, and it just let people know, hey, I work at this tattoo shop, this is what I'm about, this is what I like, and it just kind of introduced her, and she got some clients that way. You can also submit your stuff to trade magazines and things like that. There's a lot of tattoo magazines artists will submit to, and you can do radio ads, flyers, business cards. These are all kind of more of the old school things. Then there's word of mouth, which is probably the oldest but most successful version of them all. Ultimately, testimonials and stuff, that's really where people are going to build trust with you and they're going to come back. That goes into, if you have a quality service or product and you're good to people and they trust you, they're going to come back. Get testimonials and stuff. And then when you're younger too, one of the biggest things you're going to be trying to do right now is building trust, building those relationships. Some things you can do to do that is offer freebies. Some of that can be in your content, just the stuff you share in general, and that's where we get into here, social media and the web. So now we'll start talking about content in terms of marketing. This is what people are going to see on your TikTok, on your Instagram, your YouTube. That's your content. Your Facebook, that's the stuff you're sharing. You can serve a number of different purposes. One is going to keep people engaged with you. It's gonna keep you relevant if you're posting consistently. It's gonna let people know what you're about. It's gonna hopefully also serve a function of either entertaining or informing people. Basically, you're putting something out there that is of value. And that means many things to many people. Value can be just simply entertaining somebody, making them laugh. It can be teaching them something they didn't know about. What's valuable is as varied as the people who place value on these things, right? But usually if you're just being true to yourself, you're going to attract the people who are going to find value in what you have to share. But one way you do that is through proper tagging and SEO, like search engine optimization. So you start out, you're building yourself, you're putting your stuff out there. Are you a skater? You're doing skater videos. Are you an artist? You're sharing your art. Are you a comedian, a funny person? You're putting funny shit up there. You're just doing what you do, but you're putting it up there so people can see it. You're also going to be inviting them to do calls of actions, basically. So you put something up there, and you're like, if you like this, check out my website. Then on your website, you're directing them to further stuff. They can maybe download some freebies. You might have like an ebook up there. You might have like some digital downloads they can get, Then you can also direct them to your products and service, the range of stuff you have up there. But it starts out, they're going to come in through, generally speaking, they're going to come in through your Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube maybe too. And then once you get them in there, then you're going to want to kind of funnel them into your different things. So you see a lot of like things on TikTok where they have like a link in bio that you can click on and it takes you to all your other little things. If you have it like that, then you have a link up to your website or your link tree. Then you have a link to your YouTube. You can also, like, if you're looking at, like, how do I fund stuff? It takes money to make money, right? There's shit you can do, like, you do crowdfunding, like Kickstarter, GoFundMe. You can also do a Patreon where people, like, will actually, like, subscribe to, like, every month for, like, maybe $5 a month. Yeah, and that's another thing. So you're offering content, you're offering stuff that people will find value in. And then through that, people will engage with you more too. Like they're getting value through the content you share just because you like sharing, but then you can be also offering more, and then you're basically doing it on, like a scale. It's like a scale. So your regular daily posts, all the way up to like one-on-one personal day session for me example. So I could have something with a daily post I put on there, up to, booking me out for a sleep. So you have kind of like a price range for the different things you offer. Let's see here. Another thing is, so some of the stuff that's helpful in getting you out there, boosting the algorithm. So we're all familiar with the algorithm. You know what the algorithm is on TikTok and Instagram. Do I have to explain that a little bit? Anybody? You guys are like the younger generation. You were born into this. I still remember Oregon Trail with Chris Yellman. There was a time before the internet. So, how can you boost the algorithm in your favor? What's some stuff you can do to make your content go to more people? One is just using the right kind of hashtags. Just having descriptive hashtags. Like, you can do like the trending hashtags, like link of Instagram, for example, like whatever little niche you have, there's going to be like a hashtag link of Instagram. You can put that up there. You can do, it's limitless, and you can actually research like whatever your niche is, what you're interested in. You can research good hashtags for that, see what's trending. Do some research into hashtagging. Also, check out too, like sometimes they do like banned hashtags. You want to be careful with the stuff you're putting out there too, and make sure it's not something that's going to inevitably or inadvertently cause you to get not seen. Like, so be careful when you're posting stuff that you're not, accidentally posting some things that people might find offensive and important. Like you want to kind of be mindful of that and things too. Another thing that's helpful too, like if you're doing like TikTok reels, or you're doing, or if you're doing TikTok videos or Instagram reels, some things that can get you more engagement and kind of mess with the algorithm to bring you more viewers is using like trending music and trending stickers. So you usually see that where it pops up a little drop down list, especially on TikTok, but that will actually bring you more people and looking at your stuff too. So ultimately, like, you want people to engage with your social media, so that brings them to your content, your, or rather that brings them to products and services, your website. You know, like you get them interested with the Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and all that, and then you funnel them to your products and services. But the other way you can make money through this is if you end up with a large enough following, and you can monetize your stuff then. So you can monetize through YouTube and Instagram and all that, and then you start making money when people click on your videos, because people are basically paying you to put advertisements in their stuff. So then every time they click on it, they're paying you a cutback. So there's like YouTubers and stuff making like millions of dollars, you know, just doing silly, funny stuff they love to do. People love it. Look, who's familiar with the term ASMR? You guys heard of ASMR? Alright, so you guys know what ASMR is. Basically, autonomous sensory meridian response, and it's something that's blown up online. And what it is basically like videos you'll see of like all kinds of random things. Like a common one is like the soap cutting videos where they cut soap and like just shaving soap. It seems like the dumbest thing, but it provides something of immense value to people, because you have millions of people who are sitting out, spacing out on their phones, stressed the hell out, watching soap videos to cope with the world we live in. Turns out there's a lot of value in that. You wouldn't think so, but, you know, so it's good to get creative and be like, okay, I could do something like this. ASMR videos is something I got into doing because I liked watching them. I was like, actually, like, this helps me sleep and chill out. I'm the kind of person where I have 5 billion things going on in my brain, so anything that can help me relax, I find value in. So I'm gonna watch some soap cutting videos. I don't care. You know? So, I think I've kind of gone over everything I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any questions for me? Anything you want me to talk about more, follow up on? All right.
I know you guys do have questions.
You have questions.
We can wait 30 seconds for someone to get the courage.
I'm happy to answer them. It gives me something to do. Otherwise, I'm just gonna stand up here and just look weird. But also, this will all be available too. Like a couple things I would stress to you guys, if I could just kind of like follow up. In conclusion, if you will, your brand, your business, all that starts with you. If you want to be a business person, an entrepreneur, you can do that right now if you want to. You just got to think, what do I have that people would dig? You could, and it could be anything. Like, no one's saying that just because you're young doesn't mean you can't do stuff. In fact, I'm challenging you to think outside of that paradigm, because if I could have gone back 20 years ago and really made that clear to myself, like how much possibility is open to me. Another thing that's worth considering, that a really great advantage you guys have with your youth, is people love seeing young people succeed. So if you have an idea, something you're toying with, but you're like, nah, it just doesn't seem realistic, fucking go for it. Because people are gonna see that, they're gonna be like, that person's a go-getter, they got gumption, I wanna help them, I wanna see them succeed. And they're gonna buy your stuff. They're gonna talk about you. They're going to support you that much more because you're young, and it's inspiring to them to see people who are actually trying this, because it's so uncommon for people to be like, wow, I could actually do something that I would. So go for it. Don't give up on yourself. Go for your dreams. Obviously, you're gonna want to like make sure you follow this lesson in permaculture of obtaining yield. You might have to get a regular 9-to-5 job while you're building your dream, for sure. But don't let that stop you, and don't let it stop you from being creative just because of your age. You can do all kinds of stuff. You're a sovereign being. So like that's the main thing I wanna just, if I can just give you some inspiration to that, because if I realized how easy some of that stuff was. And the biggest thing that was holding me back when I was younger is just my assumptions. It was simply that. And I think each generation in certain ways seems like they get smarter with the different technologies and things we're offered. You guys have this like cool thing where you've kind of grown up with the internet and this massive amount of information at your fingertips. And you can know anything you want to, like instant. And like how cool is that? And you can communicate with anyone, anywhere on the planet, instantly. And you grew up with this. So that gives you like a completely different perspective that the boomers and the Generation Xers and some of the elder millennials don't have. I mean, you have this, but like, I would totally don't take it for granted. That's, I guess, what I want to say. Is it's like, if I would have had YouTube when I was in high school, like early high school, I could have taught myself how to do anything I want. I could learn anything I want. I didn't really have that resource when I was much, much younger. It came later, and it helped me out a lot. But just knowing how much you guys really have at your disposal, like how set up you are already, just right now, you could do a lot. So I just want to leave you with that. And then, like I said, if you were to follow up and do further research, check out permaculture, check out the book, The Four Agreements, check out the book, The Tao of Physics. And it doesn't hurt to learn some martial arts too. Because like one thing about life is fear is like the biggest thing that stops us. And if we can purposefully put ourselves into uncomfortable situations, we usually conquer our fears, be like, oh, that wasn't anything to worry about anyway. Like I was freaking out for nothing. And then like for martial arts, for example, you're training, you put yourself in a situation where I could get my ass kicked. This could suck a lot. But now I've been through this. I've had this real world experience. I know how my body's going to react. I know how to anticipate better than I would had I not had this practice. So that's also don't let fear stop you from doing stuff. Let fear motivate you to do more stuff, is what I would say. I mean, fear obviously has its place to keep us safe to an extent, but you know, when we were kind of evolving and what fear meant then versus what it means now, two vastly different things. So we kind of have to have our nervous system catch up to that. Also, another thing that's helpful too is just finding tips and tricks to learn to control your nervous system. I know it sounds kind of weird, but a lot of times we'll go into a fight or flight panic mode. We might not even be aware of it. And if we can override our nervous system and our stress response, it's going to be called fight, flight, or fawn. If we can override those, then we're not acting or we're not reacting. We're coming from a place of action versus reaction, and that's a more empowered, powerful place too. So looking at some things, it might be helpful also in tandem with others to learn some stuff like meditation, learn a martial arts, learn some things, just deep breathing exercises. You want to ultimately, you're the common denominator. It all starts with you. You got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your mind and your body, your physical, spiritual health. Because if you're pouring from an empty cup, you're not going to be able to pour into others, you know. And so that's really important too. There's this thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have any of you heard of that?
Yes, we talked about it.
All right. So recap, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically this pyramid. It's all this stuff you kind of need to have before you can really chase after the bigger dreams. If you haven't eaten and you haven't slept anywhere safe, it's going to be real hard to think about anything else, you know. So it's also taking care of yourself. Maintaining a good attitude makes it easier to do that. You know, like, it's kind of like this. Say you're hungry. You focus on like, okay, I gotta get some food. How can I get some food? You go get the food. You're gonna feel better. But like, if you consistently are doing little things so that your lower point doesn't bottom out drastically, I hope that makes sense. What I'm trying to say basically is like, take this analogy of like, if you're consistently pouring into yourself, even if it's just a little bit at a time, your baseline is gonna be higher than if you're letting things go too much, you know? So always trying to maintain a certain standard for where you're operating for yourself in terms of your health. That way, when it dips, it's not dipping too much into like the Maslow's hierarchy territory where needs aren't being met, trying to maintain that. And I know that is saying a lot too, because sometimes like you guys, you're still high school, you're still learning, you still often, you know, under like the will of your parents and everything else, but know that time passes and eventually you have more sovereignty, more control, and plan future for that. And just know too, like, don't be afraid to reach out in your community, ask for help. You are stronger together too, you know. So I will stop rambling. Thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.